Afternoon, gentlemen. I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict. Name's Chris. Thank you all very much for coming. So I thought I'd do just a very brief introduction. So for those of you that have been coming for a minute, several workshops ago, we stood up a kind of a special series. It always happens. This time, Saturday afternoons, we started off with an old-timers meeting, then we did a young and sobriety, and now we've got some AA history. So the only reason that I wanted to do the intro was Gary's been coming for just about as many meetings as I have, and he's always got just some fantastic history. So this is going to be, I'm really looking forward to this. So thank you very much for doing it.
Thank you.
And then secondarily to you guys, if there is a topic that you haven't, for those guys that have been coming, or for that matter, you're just coming around, if there's a topic that you hadn't heard about at other workshops that you'd like to hear about, please send it to me. My email address is just chairman@atlantamensworkshop.com. Please send me that topic and we'll discuss it as a committee and see about standing it up for this format. So without further ado.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris. Hi, everybody. I'm Gary. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Gary.
Now, if you are not aware of who Bobbie Berger was, join the club, because she, in many regards, was almost entirely forgotten about. And it's only been in the last 5 years anyway that her name has come back to the place where it deserves. And as a matter of fact, when I first got started trying to get this book published, I had just Bobbie's picture up as a potential book cover. And I went to a fellow who used to be behind Hazelden and a number of books there, and his response was, "Why would I want to read a book about a nobody?" Okay, and in all regards, that's by the time this is over, I want you to be convinced that this person was actually somebody. Now, Bobbie was National Secretary from March 2nd, 1942 until June 13th of 1949. There was a book that came out recently, Our Great Responsibility, which was published in 2019. Bobbie was the secretary between these two better remembered women. You can see Ruth Hawk on the left. She's the one that typed the big book, and she's also the one that at 30 Vesey Street, which was the location of the foundation, did a lot of the answering of the Jack Alexander article. On the right is Nell Wing, who was retired, who was hired as a receptionist originally, but she became Bill's secretary in 1950. Both of these women are very well remembered. Both of them were not alcoholics. Bobbie was. She was born in 1903. She was, I don't have time, there's 80 slides here, and this presentation typically takes about 70 minutes. She was born in, there's slides I can't include, but she was born in 1903, graduated from the exclusive Knox School in Tarrytown, New York. Her father was a well-to-do lawyer in patent law. She enrolled in Columbia University, but her desire to pursue an acting career took primary, and her stage name remained Margaret Roberts. Bobbie comes basically from her last name being Roberts. And you can see that she was very much a pleasure to look at. These are pictures that they're undated, but they were all regards with her dancing career, and she did some acting on Broadway as well. But her real claim to fame was with a fellow by the name of Donald Sawyer. Donald Sawyer doesn't mean a whole lot to us today, but Arthur Murray does. And Arthur Murray was a colleague of Donald Sawyer. And back in that day, you could fill Madison Square Garden with 24 couples competing to doing the calypso or foxtrot or whatever. It was really a big deal. But Donald Sawyer, I'm not exactly sure how he was able to pull this off, but he ended up taking Bobbie overseas to the continent, and they danced for the kings and queens of Europe. And you name a famous city where rich people go, and they were dancing there. And this is a picture that I got of her coming back from the SS Mauritania, probably around 1924. She was really very much of a pleasure to look at. She married when I started off, I knew the name Berger. Actually, going backward for a moment, is I was asked to do the history of Georgia AA as I was an archivist for the state of Georgia. And that was in 2015, and I was going to do the presentation of Georgia AA at the AA International, which I did. But when I went down to Macon, Georgia, which is where our archives are kept, I found a notebook. The notebook had 380 pages in it. And the first thing I did was make a catalog of that notebook, and I kept coming across this name, Margaret Berger. I had no clue who she was. But it so turns out that if you had written a letter up to the GSO, it was called the Foundation back then, it was going to be answered by Bobbie Berger, or Margaret Berger. That's when I first came across her. And at the time, actually, when I kept on getting more and more curious about this person as the years went by 2019, I had collected enough so the information that's in this presentation come from about 1,000 letters that come out of the GSO. And if you want to get anything from the GSO these days in letter form, what you have to do is you have to, you're not allowed to copy anything, you're not allowed to take a picture of anything. What you have to do is you go and you dictate, then come home and transcribe. So I got 1,000 of the letters that way. But I still didn't know, though, whether or not Berger was a married name or a maiden name. Well, it turns out that Bobbie had left papers with one of her son-in-laws. And this was a private collection in Vermont. And I paid, I don't know how much, to have 700 pages of that collection sent down to me in Georgia. And you're going to find that in this presentation, you're going to find a different kind of Bill Wilson than you find almost anywhere else. It's because that Bobbie and Bill ended up having a very special relationship. But again, it was only through a 1930 census that I was able to find Bobbie in that census, but where the last name's misspelled as B-E-R-G-E-R. But that's where I found she had children, and actually I was able to contact the 3 of her grandchildren who supported this project and were present early on for the first presentations I did this. So here you have Mr. and Mrs. Norman Berger. There, Norman's again on the left, and immediately on the right you have Bobbie with one daughter, Sybil, who would be sitting to the right, and another daughter by the name of Gloria. Unfortunately, Norman, the husband, died after 3.5 years of marriage, and he was at the chapel of the Emmanuel Baptist Church is where they had a memorial service for him, but she ended up as a widow at a very early age. Notice there's no such thing, there's no mention of alcohol yet. And her second marriage was to a fellow by the name of Irwin Shepard Spink. She was married to him on September 23, 1932. Shep had already been married once. At this time, Bobbie was a dance instructor for Arthur Murray, and it's most likely, we don't know for sure, but it's likely that's where they met. He was employed by Time Life Publications in advertising, and because he was a young up-and-comer, that caused him to move to Detroit roughly after a year of marriage, then to Cleveland. I'm a Clevelander, okay, so I'm not going to be dumping on my hometown, but for her anyway, she's a creature of Manhattan. And so, Cleveland could have been Siberia as far as she was concerned. But she knew this is where her husband was busy all the time doing what in his business, and so he wasn't coming home, and so she would start to drink. And by 1936, Shep refused to be embarrassed by Bobbie's drinking. He tried to discipline her. So, 1936, this is when we get into alcoholism. This is a 4-year period of sanitariums and asylums. And after a 10-day alcoholic binge, when she ran away from her husband and children, Her father and husband found her in the South, we don't know where. They decided to have her hospitalized in Doctors Hospital in Manhattan in February of 1936. Notice what's going on with, we have AA, that it's not called AA yet, but this is going on almost as AA is taking form. She was released on March 16th of 1936. Her husband brought the children to Dobbs Ferry, New York, which was Bobbie's home at the time, with her parents, and so Bobbie could go on vacation to Daytona. There was no need for her to stop drinking. Drinking was a mental illness, according to the Times, or at least this school of thought. So Shep was dining with Henry Luce, and he was the most influential private citizen in America that day, the owner of Time Life magazine. So, in 1934, she's dancing for the kings and queens of Europe. By 1936, she's being spanked by her second husband for being a drunk. This picture is taken out of a 1943 Sunday supplement called The American Weekly, dated July 11th of 1943. It's second to the Saturday Evening Post in terms of solicitations that resulted. It was actually a three-part. It came out on July 18th. And July 25th as well. But this is a picture of a woman being spanked. Allegedly, that was about the name of a lady by the name of Enid, but it was actually an interview of Bobbie, and it was biographical. The Hartford Retreat for the Insane. Now, for sure, we don't call anything like that anymore. Can you imagine? But we had, we had the Milledgeville Hospital for the Insane, which was very close to here. And do you realize that was the largest mental hospital in the country? Okay, and it had 12, at one time or another, it had 12,000 people. Okay, and can you imagine how many of those people do you think were drunks? Yeah, lots of them. I don't know, we don't keep any statistics, but my heavens. Whenever I think of, but a lot of people, the ignorance of how you deal with alcoholism is alcoholics were ending up in insane asylums and were treating as if they were mental cases. And so what would a place like the Hartford Retreat for the Insane, which incidentally exists to this day, it's called for the Institute of Living. They've it sounds like a much different place, okay? But she entered Hartford Retreat for the Insane in mid-May of 1936, and so here we need to give dignity to alcoholics. And so they're going to give them a craft and something to do that they can be proud of, and that will help them heal. So typing, crafts, PE, gardening, homemaking, no basket weaving, they're very proud of that. No rug making, but they have art lectures, literary readings, bridge lessons, and so forth. And is it any surprise that she almost relapsed almost immediately afterwards? Okay, and then we have Life of Bloomingdale, which is actually a hospital in Westchester County, at White Plains in New York. It was known as New York Hospital and exists to this day. Now, we don't have a record of Bobbie being there, but we do have a record of Lillian Roth being there 10 years later. And I will make the assumption that the treatments were similar between Lillian Roth and Bobbie. In an institution like Bloomingdale, which rarely takes alcoholics, the chronic drinker receives psychiatric and medical treatment similar to that of afforded regular mental patients. I've been without alcohol, again, Lillian Roth, since my arrival. The formaldehyde, vitamin injections, and other medications helped tide me over. A community therapeutic shower followed breakfast to relax us. We sat in the line naked, but for a sheet, which nurses sprayed us with hot water, then tepid, then ice water needles. Hydronic treatment was part of treating alcoholism as well. Gym and dancing followed. Isn't that wonderful? After a lot of fresh air, we were taken to mental therapy rooms. Some painted, here we go with the dignity again. Some sanded boxes, others made leather, and so on. And again, is it any surprise that she was able to be released so Christmas can be spent with her husband, who would run out of patience by the time he announced he wanted a divorce. Bobbie left Bloomingdale in January of 1937. Possible suicide attempt afterwards. Divorced in June. And Shep ended up remarrying and very quickly having a child with his third marriage. Stamford Hall was another asylum, and you'd notice that the feature of the grounds, the grounds were dead. I always forget the fellow's name that did Central Park. Frederick Law Homestead, there's where we go, that's the name. But in sanitariums, it was a big deal to have very nice surroundings. They wanted to have serene surroundings so when you walked out of the building, you could be peaceful and so forth. And at such sanitariums, they spent quite a bit of money on that. But we know that Bobbie ended up at this location because of the letters that her children were writing to her. But this is Bobbie's encounter with Marty Mann, the well-known speaker, which many people, when it comes to a female alcoholic, they'll think of her first. Marty took one, this is out of a book called Mrs. Marty Mann, and this is in 1939. Marty took one look at the patient, which was Bobbie, and decided you wouldn't spend any effort on her. Didn't have one chance in a million. Marty was wrong. This woman did make it. Her name was Bobbie. A very common misspelling. Is more or less the male version of it. Bobbie eventually became the secretary of AA's General Service Office, and her name was known to AAs all over the world. That statement is true. But isn't this interesting? Marty learned the hard way that you can't predictably predict what newcomer is going to get sober and who will not. You think anything has changed with that regard? You know, the guy that you think is a loser and so forth turns out to be your GSR, and the guy that has everything never gets the program at all. Isn't that? To me, that's very much of a mystery to this day. This is Bobbie's letter, very brief letter to Lois, and it was to Lois because Lois Wilson, Bill's wife, was attending most of the meetings that Bill was himself. My dear Lois Wilson, your name was given to me by Dr. Allen of White Plains. That was Bloomingdale. May I please attend your meeting on Tuesday, March 19th at Steinway Hall. That's a very prestigious place to have a meeting. I forgot to ask Dr. Allen, I would like to attend with the hope of coming permanent if I qualify. Well, she qualified. Okay. And Bobbie, one of the things about Bobbie, she's sober, she's a driver, and she's a member. The first documented activity of Bobbie sober involved Bill and her 12-stepping Mac by driving them to High Watch Farm, which was basically the first AA treatment center. But there she is with Bill right from the very beginning. Those with the team, again, taking Bobbie's boyfriend. Bobbie had a car. At this time, Bill and Lois often didn't. They were often driven places rather than drive themselves. The first mention of Bobbie in Lois's diary has, again, Bobbie misspelled, part of a group at High Watch Farm that went dancing on Saturday night. But you can see from the very beginning, Bobbie is very involved with the Wilsons. But in September of 1940, Bobbie went a little bit berserk because her boyfriend, Mac, got drunk and allegedly was with another woman. She went nuts. She was driven by, Bill was driven by Jack W. to rescue her. She was found in Mac's apartment. The episode has been referred to when Bill 12-stepped Bobbie, as if this was her sobriety date. I believe her sobriety date was actually early April or late March of 1940. He did give her sedatives. Bill took the keys to her car, and Bill did not come home. By October 10, however, all seems forgiven. While Bill left for an overnight visit to Philadelphia, Lois had dinner with Bobbie and Mac before attending a meeting at the 24th Street Clubhouse, which was the main clubhouse in Manhattan at that time. In 1941, these are the major events that she was related to. She became a secretary of the 24th Street Clubhouse, which had opened sometime in February of 1940. Dick S., the car smasher, warned her about overdoing. Now, Bobbie was trained as a dancer and was very disciplined and so forth, but overdoing turned out to be very much of a difficulty for her. She was very involved in the Saturday Evening Post article. So involved that actually Lois remembered in error that it was Bobbie and Lois that did all the response to the Saturday Evening Post. That is in fact an error. Bobbie and Lois contributed to responding. Lois had mistaken in a book called Lois Remembers that Ruth Hawk, the first national secretary, was still there she was there until February of 1942 and did a great deal of the answering of all the thousands of inquiries that resulted from that magazine. This is Bobbie B. and Ruth Hawk. She remained good friends after Ruth moved to Cleveland. You know, we take pictures for granted very much, but if back then, if you wanted a picture of Bill Wilson, the place that you most likely would get it would be from Ruth's husband. Her name was Crecilius back then, but if you paid $3 and sent a letter off to Ruth's husband, that would be the only way you would get yourself a picture of Bill Wilson. That's the only picture we have of Bobbie and Ruth together. Bobbie became National Secretary on March 2nd of 1942. And this is a quote out of Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age, written by Bill Wilson. Ruth was replaced by Bobbie B., who became AA's National Secretary #2. Bobbie's complete loyalty and devotion and her unbelievable energy and capacity for hard work were priceless helps during the confused and hazardous years which now lay ahead of us. Honest to goodness, these are confused and hazardous years, and honest to goodness, without traditions, much of the book that I wrote had to do with the forming of the traditions and how crazy we are without them. We are not very nice people without traditions when it comes right down to it. Around March of 1942, this is something we should actually celebrate as far as I'm concerned. Bill tried to join the Army. He was 47 years old. A month later, the news came that Bill flunked the physical. That's what we celebrate. What would have happened to us had he joined the Army in March of 1942? I have no idea. He was apparently brokenhearted. And we have some statistics that are there in terms of how fast AA started to grow, even as World War II commenced. Bobbie on the job. It's a wonderful feeling to have and to know. There are so many friends all over the country assisting and supporting our great program. Personally, I just love my job, and I can't imagine any word that can give me more happiness. I was written again in March of 1942. Very shortly, Bill W. and I are going to set down some answers on questions you wrote in the group activities and organization. We hope to have the booklet I mentioned to you well on the way by now, but on thinking that matter over, we have decided to do it in a thorough manner, and this will take time. You know, it is very interesting, and something we don't know is that to what degree did Bobbie contribute to Bill's writing or Bill's ideas? We don't know that. We do know this, however, is Bobbie was the only alcoholic that worked at the foundation until mid-1946. So Bobbie was the one that understood. And we have repeated events where Bobbie and Bill are working on something. We never had any practical output of that work until the traditions came out in April of 1946. Again, to what degree Bobbie contributed to the traditions is anybody's guess. This is a picture of Dr. Bob, personally signed by Bobbie, in the lower right-hand corner, which I blew up. Would you believe this picture? I haven't checked recently, but at one time this picture was selling on eBay, signed over to Bobbie for $22,000. And there is not a great deal of information in the book regarding Dr. Bob, and that is not by the intent. But when I was in the GSO, you don't get a listing of what they have. I asked for all the information that came from the state of Ohio. I didn't realize that did not include Dr. Bob, and as a result, I'm really skinny on what should be, and maybe in the second edition someday, that might be in the book, but it was not intentional to leave Dr. Bob out of it. But this was, again, Bobbie was obviously giving Dr. Bob the royalty checks, and that meant they had a rather consistent dialogue going on between them. Now again, a little different, here we have AA's Pledge for National Defense and Self-Preservation, which comes out in spring of 1942. And you got to remember, a war zone, and there's no such thing as traditions. So this was published in the newspaper, and I won't read every one of these, but I will keep myself fit physically, mentally, spiritually, to be ready for any crisis, to discipline myself for strength. I will go about my business with a clear eye, a cool head, and a stout heart, neither scared by wild rumors nor deluded by false security. Skipping down, I will work for unity among all our people and oppose efforts to create hatred based on race, creed, or color. Not bad for that time in 1942, as far as I'm concerned. And here we have a plan for AAs in the armed forces. This is May 15th of 1942. Bobbie comes up with the idea of trying to keep Army members or any members of the military contacted with each other as they're moving around. As we all know, many of our members are now in the service of the United States. We are justly proud of the work they are doing. We can, in part, helping those boys get in touch with each other. They will miss their group association. With this thought in mind, we have started a file with the names and addresses of those who are serving our country. Skipping a bit, by the time the first grapevine was published in 1944, a list of military had grown to 300 members. How to sponsor a country. Now, the thing is, Bobbie was writing people, and the people in New York did not know what she was writing, or for that matter, to who she was writing. But if you actually check out a book called One to Another, which is the Australian Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age, you'll find the first 180 pages of that book are dedicated to Bobbie Berger, because she's the one that was writing back and forth with a doctor by the name of Sylvester Minogue, who was a psychologist at the time, who didn't know he was an alcoholic, incidentally, and he eventually joined AA. But Bobbie sponsored a country, Australia, and she also sponsored other countries as well. And when you look at the words that she wrote, these are words that you think might be written by Bill. Our members come from walks of life. Our spiritual concepts are broad. Our members are Catholics, Protestants, and Jews, and most nationalities are represented. In round figures, we believe we have about 1 woman member and 7 men. Alcoholism is no respecter of race, color, creed, or sex, and may become, and all but any may become alcoholic, but all can recover if they wish. Now I'm going to skip down to the bold. Bill W., who wrote the text of this book, of the book Alcoholics Anonymous, and I are now editing a compilation of the group experiences over the past 5 years. This may be out this summer, and we will be glad to send you a copy if you are interested. Now, mind you, there was never any practical result of that we know of. You would look at the forward to the first edition. We are too few at present to handle the overwhelming number of personal appeals which may result from this publication. I didn't realize until I came across the letters that were at the GSO that up in at least October 20th of 1943, the headquarters phone number was unlisted. That's how scared they were of being buried underneath phone calls. So the only way you were going to get a hold of anyone in Alcoholics Anonymous would be is you had to write them, and the person that was going to open that correspondence was Bobbie. Okay, so unless you were in Cleveland or Chicago, which had infrastructure already, they had intergroups and so on. But if you weren't in those locations, again, you had to write, and you had to write AA in New York, and Bobbie was the person that you would have been talking to. Now again, we did have a war on, and we didn't have traditions. In 1943 through 45, Bobbie repeatedly encouraged a fellow by the name of Warren at the Kaiser shipyards in Richmond, California, The company listed him to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. The AA Richmond group, AA group openly helped keep employees sober. The effort was reported to have saved 44 man-years. That was publicized in the newspaper. At DuPont, an AA member was confidentially employed as being a member of a personal department. All drunks were routed to him. That was very similar to what was going on in Akron at the time. Also, at the time, AA reprinted 1,000 copies of 2 employers in which they wished to distribute to defense plants. Now, this is the first of the treasure chest that came out of Vermont, and the first letter that Bill wrote to Bobbie, the letter is to the right, and again, if I didn't pay for color, it should be the yellow legal pad, but this will introduce you to a Bill Wilson that is hard to find elsewhere. Nothing can be such a break on the joy of living as to have one around in a black mood whose pall covers everybody in reach. And especially with you so very tired, it was really a mean exhibition of childness for which I am very, very sorry. I wish I might be endowed with the words to tell you just how deeply and affectionately I regard you as Bobbie, my dear partner of our fabulous enterprise. I'm going to skip for purposes of time. You have been doing just that so loyally, so beautifully, Bobbie dear, that I know I shall be inspired to follow you. Your example, forgive me, I have so often been dead weight to be carried. And this, Bill took and Lois took a tour at the beginning in October 24th of 1943 and spent 3 months going up and down the coast. And this was a selection from a letter, and again, for the interest of time, I'll just simply read the bold, because he was going up and down the coast, and guess what? The meetings were all relatively the same. That didn't happen by accident. What he was realizing, and this was what Bobbie was doing, and he's discovered by going there and seeing how the meetings were in place and relatively similar, that was no accident. That's what Bobbie was doing. And he says, this speech making of mine is a pleasant luxury for people here, but no necessity. Thank heaven. It is, on the contrary, you who is needed. More and more, I see what you mean to them, they tell me. And again, she's the one that is managing and keeping the groups in contact with each other, but also sharing with each other what works and what doesn't work. And again, this is well before any kinds of traditions, but many of their traditions, if we had time for it, would be, we're going to get an example in a little bit, but many of the traditions were being formed, not because Bill Wilson had nothing better to do. It was a direct result of what was going on and what was coming at them. It was actually necessary to the reaction, and always looking for what worked, and as the end result. So here's a rare newspaper quote by Bobbie when she was traveling with Bill, which she did until 1944. This trip included Cincinnati, Dayton, Ohio, Louisville, Kentucky, and Parkersburg, West Virginia. And this actually was the last time they did travel together for reasons that escape me. You see, alcoholics meet to describe aid, and she's called Miss Bobbie Berger. At that stage, she was always a Mrs. Bobbie Berger. She never kept the name of her second husband, but it's very rarely do you find any kind of newspaper article about her. It was everybody always wanted to see Bill, which is part of what contributed to her being forgotten. Bobbie claiming the ruse and rumors about Bill's health. Now, this is the beginning of a coverage of Bill's depressions. Now, there's a book called by Mel Barger called In Search of Bill W. In that book, Bill writes that he was depressed for 8 of the 12 years between 1943 and 1955. That's quoting Bill. That's not trying to be nasty or anything else other than just to simply relay what was going on in Bill's life. Now, Bobbie her role turns out to be to protect Bill from us, protect Bill from the fellowship. Okay, because always in these, we've got 4 examples that are listed here. It's always the doctor. It's never the psychiatrist. Okay, which would throw off alarm bells. You mean to tell me that the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous can't use the steps to deal with his own problem? Do you have any idea what kind of damage that could have done? Okay, if they actually knew that Bill many times couldn't get out of bed, and that's incidentally, that's his own admission. So that, here we go, August 15th, 1944. I'm just skipping for one again for time. The doctor has asked that Bill not receive any so-called business mail, so I'm holding your letter until he returns. I'm sure you will understand and agree that we must think of Bill's health first. He so long only thought of us. And now they're reading, the rumors, even facts do grow on intangible grapevine. Bill has not had a breakdown, and he has not gone into a hospital. And incidentally, I'm also convinced, and this is something I cannot document, nastygrams. During this period of time, people are writing letters to Bill and Bobbie accusing them of being drunk, of being all sorts of things. And due to the anonymity, I am convinced, and there's no doubt, there are restricted letters at the GSO which nobody is allowed to see, and I don't know when those letters will ever be made public. But the reason it has to do with copyright law, but also the potential in the litigation crazy world that a lawsuit could result. A letter is the ownership of the person with the copyright for 70 years after the letter is written. Okay, so for example, everything that Bill Wilson wrote could go out of copyright in 2041 when he's been dead for 70 years. But the person that wrote the nastygram, their grandchildren, if for some reason a letter came out that described Bill as being a jerk or something like that, the grandchildren could sue the GSO, which is part of the copyright policy and why they implemented to try to protect themselves from lawsuits. Okay, and that's been it's something you're not aware of, but that's why they do have a copyright policy today, where you can't copy letters, and you can't take pictures of them as well. That copyright has evolved since 1993, and incidentally, I wouldn't be sitting here. I started this by saying I found a notebook at our archives in Macon. But that archives that was asked by our delegate in 1993 before there was a copyright policy, which is the only reason why we have it. But if you were to ask for such a notebook to be created today, the request would be denied because of the copyright policy that has evolved. That's life. That's Now, Merry Christmas to you all from the trustees, from Bobbie, from Lois, and me, Bill Wilson. This was actually a Christmas card. It was in a display in the Cleveland Central Bulletin. And I'm not even going to try to read the Christmas tree, but right down at the bottom, if you look real hard, you can see those are the words, Merry Christmas to you all. That's how the salutation from the trustees, from Bobbie and Lois and me. Can you imagine? That's her company. That's where she belongs. And many of you are aware that a wartime edition of the Big Book came out in February of 1945, and it was Bobbie who managed the shrinkage of the book, which was required because of the War Act. Everything was being quarantined back then. We now have arrived at the point where we became further reduction in paper. We must sharply cut the overall size of the book by trimming margins. So again, paper was being quarantined back then as well. Bobbie in the May 1945 grapevine, skipping to the fourth line. Bobbie B, 5 years in AA, though Bobbie works, and how. They know how hard this woman works. Here in Manhattan, she is perhaps even better known to the thousands with which she corresponds all over the country. Yes, that's the people that knew her, not the people in New York. In her capacity as National Secretary of the Central AA office in New York since 1942. Before that, she was Secretary of the Manhattan Group, and before that, Bobbie puts herself, I was just a drunk. More Bobbie's role of protecting Bill from the fellowship. And I'll just deal with the bold again here. December 18th, 1945. Perhaps you have not heard that the doctors, again, doctors, took Bill away from active work about a year and a half ago, and so he seldom comes into the office. All the work having to do with new groups, and in fact, practically all correspondence now clears through my desk. So Bobbie would be at the foundation offices, which we know as the GSO today. Bill would spend most of his time out at Stepping Stones, severed for the newcomers. They may not know that Stepping Stones is the name of Bill and Lois's home, which is located in Katona, New York, which is a healthy train ride, but still in New York. And I've done that train ride, incidentally, to Stepping Stones. But anyway, this is again, and it's doctors, not psychiatrists. And by 1947, he was seeing both Dr. Tebow, and then he was also seeing a lady by the name of Frances Weeks. But again, doctors is okay. Psychiatrists would have set off alarm bells all over the place. Now here is a documented evidence that Bill, without traditions, mind you, had us up to here, okay? This is where he might retire. At the last meeting of the foundation, there was a discussion of the possibility I might retire from active participation in the central office and work publishing. The central office, under the guidance of the trustees and two excellent national secretaries, that's Bobbie and Ruth, have been the keystone of the arch under which thousands of alcoholics have found their way to a new life. If I should suddenly pass out of the picture, there would be no one left in AA excepting Bobbie B. Should she leave, we would be in a serious predicament. The whole continuity of the central office is depending upon the good health and continued attention of Mrs. B and me. I'll skip the rest of that. But again, in bold, for the past year and a half, I have made few decisions, nor have I been in much at the central office. I am happy to say that Mrs. B, that's Bobbie, occasionally consulting with the trustees on the detail side of the office, has done an excellent job. She has operated Work Publishing Incorporated, recently turning out a large new edition of books without any assistance from me whatsoever. This is one of the two pictures that was of Bobbie on the internet prior to the publication of the book that stands behind this. And now this is the empty jug episode, which lasted 2 years, and it's about a fellow by the name of Carl K., who got sober after some false starts on July 18th of 1944. He founded a 4-page newspaper in September of 1944. He had 6 weeks of sobriety and no sponsor. What could possibly go wrong with that? He was seriously offended when Bill W. declared the Grapevine to be the official magazine of AA in October of 1945. Again, he had no evidence that he ever had a sponsor. He was out of the control of Bobbie. And despite Bobbie's repeated attempts, Carl simply disregarded her. Now this is Bill Wilson's first letter to Carl, and actually in the full version in the book, this goes, well actually this is 4 panels, but all I have time for is Bill is trying to be very conciliatory in this one. Carl thought that the empty jug was supposed to be competitive with the Grapevine, which never occurred to Bill. It is also a powerful tradition that AA groups have one aim only, to help the sick alcoholic. Anybody get Tradition 5 out of that before there was a Tradition 5? Okay, it is felt that we should never express an opinion or controversial matter such as politics, religion. We're getting Tradition 10, we're getting traditions again before there were traditions. But Carl didn't listen to that, so Bill wrote a second letter to Carl, and all I have time for with this is to go after the underline, and that is, but I beg of you, please don't use the empty jug to fight anybody or anything. Well, that didn't stop Carl at all. And this was rumors that was in a March 1946 empty jug, and all I have time for is that Carl is thinking that the steps are being written for some reason in New York, and he's suspicious of what might be coming down the pike. And then he's again highly sarcastic regarding anything that was going on in New York. And here's where he truly is a one-man need for traditions, if there ever was one. An open letter to subscribers in his newspaper in June of 1946, he complained about harassment from New York. He was breaking the anonymity of AA members recklessly. He insisted that atheists are fools and idiots. He wished to machine gun liquor company executives that he compared to a nest of snakes that wanted to take over the country, turning people into human derelicts. He wrote AA headquarters thought Manhattan the home of the Garden of Eden and the throat of God. Finally, he accused Hollywood movie executives of murder. My heavens. So, it just turns out AA couldn't shut him up, and this is an editorial, but all I'll say is God did for us what we couldn't do for ourselves. He died. He dropped over dead, and it might have been a cerebral hemorrhage, but it might have been a suicide. We really don't know, but that ended that chapter. Bill's February 27th. This is again the treasure chest, and this gives you a different flavor. And yesterday's experience in town have convinced me that I shall have to hasten my parting with our national activities. It was so severe that I dare not ride many more. Worse than the time I left for Florida 2 years ago. Worse because 100 such experiences have worn any lingering hope that I shall ever be better under the present conditions. The power and the obsession has finally dispelled the illusion that it could ever basically improve as things are now. Skipping. All last year I wanted to do 1,000 times to make a decision, but I could not. I would hope something might turn up, a remedy, diversion, maybe a fresh experience that would bring release. It's more of the same letter, and I'll go on to just the bold again for time. I lived on borrowed time, and I felt I belonged to AA, that I had no right to make this new bid for personal freedom, feeling no ability to decide that conflict. I collapsed. It is the same way about coming to New York. When here, I'm irresistibly drawn there. When there, I soon must fly back here. That deadlock can't continue too much longer without serious consequences. There has to be a decision. I don't see how it can be the decision to stay on. We've given that a 2-year trial, nor can one stand forever. The whipsaw of indecision. Again, that is a personal letter written to Bobbie from Bill, showing that just the agony that he was in February of 1946, right ahead of the traditions coming out. Nevertheless, Bobbie's personal observations about Bill. He's tops in my book. There never was or never will be another Bill W. How about that for 1943? He's such a naive person that he hasn't the slightest idea how truly great he is. It takes a Bill to turn on the lights, so to speak. Someday all this early history will be written, I suppose, in Bill's biography, for I can see that coming, even if he can. Of course, how many biographies of Bill are there? Bill has given us his last 10 years without any thought of himself. This is a picture taken of Bobbie in San Francisco in October of 1946, which coincides with a gossip column. Bobbie's trip to California ended up in the very famous lady Luella Parsons' gossip column, where she claimed that Bobbie went out there for a movie deal that involved $50,000. and not a word of this was true. But anyway, it made for good gossip. AA's explosive growth, 1945 to 1949. I won't go through the numbers yourself, but you can see everything goes up by 3, 4, or 5 times. Whether or not it's budget, the employees at the GSO, again, the foundation, the number of groups, and the members. And Bobbie tried to keep up with that rapid growth. Nevertheless, this is Bill writing in 1947 out of a publication, Alcohol Foundation of Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow. 2 secretaries, because of their station at the heart of AA, they are bound to have a broader view than most of us. Out of the strenuous experience, they have developed effective ways of handling the multitude of problems and situations that press for answers. They have an immense personal acquaintance that stretches all over the globe. However, times are changing with all that rapid growth. These are 2 different paragraphs from the same Grapevine article, both been written by Bill. One, AA leadership is becoming a rotating matter. The other one, AA to function by fundamental principles. Times have changed, as everyone knows. AA has since exceeded our wild expectation. Speaking for Dr. Bob and myself, we feel that we oldsters, that includes Bobbie incidentally, need not take the prominent roles we once did. AA leadership is becoming happily and healthily a rotating matter. AA, in the next one, AA may be able to function upon the power of its own fundamental principles rather than upon the prestige or inspiration of a highly personalized leadership. Well, Bobbie was a highly personalized leadership. Nevertheless, Bobbie's observation in January of 1948. Bill is still struggling, and underneath all my agreement, I realize his wisdom. AA must one day learn to operate without Bill, and he hopes to see their structure go into effect while he is around. He simply cannot answer every letter that comes in and usually tosses his mail to either Charlotte, who was Bobbie's assistant at the time, and me for answering. Bill is spending all of his time working on the traditions. This is a letter from Tom Yetzi, who is the original author of AA's the Grapevine preamble that we read all the time. I know this is written to Bill from Tom. I know that you have sought through your reorganization plans to prevent the development of a bureaucracy in AA and the creation of positions of personal power. I also think that the more widely the policies of anonymity in office, rotation in office, principle over person, and service over career can be applied to all AA activities. When Bobbie was the only alcoholic at the GSO in 1946, there was no purpose for rotation, but times changed. Bill's 1948 Christmas message, all I have again, I'm going to read here for purposes of time, is the conclusion. The trustees, the Grapeviners, Dr. Bob, Ann, Bobbie, Lois, and I wish you the happiest of New Year's as ever, Bill. That's again the company that she had then. This is Bobbie's April 13th, 1945 letter regarding Bill's trip to Des Moines and Minneapolis, which had taken place in the previous fall. He intended to visit Denver and some of the larger centers late last year, but his health gave out. It's always his health, not anything to do with the psychiatrist. He did go to Des Moines, Iowa, and Minneapolis because he had definite commitments and larger conferences had been planned, but his doctor would not let him take on anything more. And then Bill had, yes, he was depressed from time to time, but he also had wonderful periods of productivity. I don't think Bobbie was seeing that, and she was also suffering, I think, from a separation from Bill, because Bill wasn't around out of that much. He has been very active in all AA affairs he is inactive for some time. Perhaps you did not know that he has been off the sick list for 4 years, and I think this is the beginning of Bobbie really missing Bill. They once had a close relationship, but that was of the past. Then we come up with this poem dated June 10th, 1949. If you see a tall fellow ahead of a crowd, a leader of men marching fearless and proud, and you know of a tale whose more telling aloud would mean that his head must be in anguish be bound, it's a pretty good plan to forget it. If you know of a thing that will darken the joy of a man or a woman, a girl or a boy, that will wipe out a smile or the least way annoy, or cause any gladness or brightness to cloy, it's a pretty good plan to forget it. That was the last thing she wrote as National Secretary. We believe that she wrote that, or it wasn't signed. She resigned on June 13th, 1949. She had relapsed previously. We don't know when. Later, she wished to learn why she drank. And she wrote this to Leonard Harrison, who was the chairman of the trustees. "No one could be more grateful than I to be here with Dr. Tebow," which she made a beeline for his hospital as soon as she could get there. "I had hoped and often prayed to hang around until August in the vacation, but that would have been only a temporary solution to something which has been fundamentally wrong for years. Probably long before I found AA. The compulsive, frantic activity which I misnamed necessity turned me into a machine which could not stop until it broke down in every way. No one ever made me or even asked me to work as I did. I just couldn't help it and I didn't know why. Out of this chaos will come something better than I have ever known, and perhaps someday I can be truly useful for the first time in my life." My heavens. Can you get the depression that happens to be that? Because she's been useful for so many people. But nevertheless, again, it's self-condemnation. Accolades from around the world. I could give you 3 times as many as are listed here. From India, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, and Massachusetts, Michigan, Rhode Island. I mean, they came from all over the place. Simply because it was the people out in the field that were relying upon her, that knew her, that had become friends with her. And you will know, reading the 4th one, "Now you will know that I am with you in prayer all the time. I hope you enjoy every minute of your rest. The work you have done for AAs in the States and abroad will go on now. AAs remembering always with the deepest gratitude how much they owe you." They're all like that. And then the handbook for the secretary comes out in September of 49, which has to have her handwriting all over it, her fingerprints all over it. But they came out 3 months after she resigned. Bobbie's amends to Bill and Lois, which she wrote because of her abrupt departure. "I understand that you are now feeling badly. I am sorry more than I can tell you, although so I wish you might find your way out of your darkness. I think you often and pray for you much. It is so much easier to pray for others than for one's own self. Have you ever been able to understand how much I wish I could have avoided the pain caused you and Lois? It is beginning to come to me that these things cannot be explained in words, but are only felt through understanding. Because of my illness and so little I know of it, a small bit of the suffering you have gone through is clear to me. About 8 years ago, you opened the door to 30 Vesey Street, which was the GSO at the time, and in so doing, you gave me what might have been a useful life. Along the way, I took a detour, I lost myself. I hope one day I can earn the right to do something so that you will have, and that your faith in me was not completely misplaced." 11 days later, Bill replies to Bobbie, and he replies this way: "You said you felt sorry you had caused Lois and me disturbance. So far as I'm concerned, that will quite be always the other way around. I cannot doubt that my own obstinate, yes, downright willful illness hung around a millstone around your neck. God knows how long I've been learning, too, that self-condemnation leads so subtly and oh so surely to the condemnation of others. I often wish the word blame could be taken out of my feeling and speech forever." What a wonderful line that is to remember. "I've always looked up to you, your illnesses notwithstanding, as a person of marvelous inner integrity, something far more basic than I ever had. I want you to know how much I appreciate this great gift of yours, how you went at all to share it with me." The trustees recognized Bobbie, and the gist of this is that there was some writing for years about Bobbie was fired from the GSO, which is definitely not true. And what did happen is that in a July trustees meeting, they voted her $2,000 in up to $2,000 in medical expenses. And then in November, in a trustees meeting, they voted her a gift of $3,750. Put the two of them together, it's 77 grand, the equivalent if you put that into a cost of living index. That was the trustees, upon learning her contributions to Alcoholics Anonymous. That was her severance pay, which was evidence that you don't do that with somebody you fired. You do that with someone who was a true contributor. And this is Bill's contributed a Christmas letter to Bobbie. Christmas makes me want to say some things, not new things, just old ones you mustn't ever forget. I want you to remember, since I am the only one who can have any real idea of what your labor for AA meant to us in its infancy, just how much I appreciate and love you for that. Then there's your capacity to devotion, which Lois and I and so many have been the continuous receiver for years, though in my case your unswerving loyalty was so often undeserved. Also, believe the pain can be and usually is the price and touchstone of progress. Anybody get step 10 out of that? Okay, out of the 12 and 12. But I know it's hard to cling to that fact when suffering is intense and you feel done. I now understand what must have been your feelings as you helplessly had to watch me stuck in the murk. If only neurosis could be more enjoyable. These are just examples of the two Bill Wilson letters. Again, they're on the yellow legal pad. And his writing's pretty good. Sometimes they can be very hard to decipher. Bobbie went to Hollywood and through, actually, Bill wrote her a recommendation. And she was given credit in a movie by Kroger, a Kroger Bad movie, One Too Many, released in 1950. She was also an advisor for the Hal Wallace movie, Come Back Little Shiva, in 1952, which starred Burt Lancaster and earned an Oscar for Shirley Booth. And she also stayed close enough to AA. This is the fourth line of the first page of Dr. Bob's memory book that was there for his memorial service in November of 1950. Bill's letter to Bobbie in Christmas of 1950. Never has there been a Christmas where old friends were such a cause for gratitude, and none do I owe more than to those days we were together, when we helped fashion the shape of things to come, are set down in my book of the never to be forgotten. My endless thanks to you, dear Bobbie. Should 1951 bring any cloud, may it soon be dispelled, and may I help you do that for now. Merry Christmas, dear partner. This is Bobbie dancing at her daughter Sybil's wedding, which was in June 28th of 1952. And she was described as often wearing these little hats, and that's one picture that has her doing so. Now, the 99-page dream diary. If she had any pleasant dreams, I don't know of any. But she, upon leaving the GSO in 1949 mid, she started reading and typing out her dream journal. And drinking accusations are found quite often, resulting with guilt, punishments, sanitariums. She didn't dream about pills, but Charlotte was Bobbie's best friend, but Bobbie got drunk actually before she did. Bobbie was only female friend. Alcoholism thrives in isolation. Bobbie was definitely isolated. No evidence of her presence at any meetings in New York after the summer of 1949. Dreams about Bill Wilson's occurred frequently. Sometimes felt close. Sometimes she was being judged. No questions, she loved Bill, and I mean that in an agape way. Many women just adored Bill. He had just the aura, which I believe was very attractive and very much of an authority figure. Her parents and daughters were often subjects of the dreams as well. A was mentioned only a few times. Dr. Tebow was in 20 dreams. 16 dreams of unknown men. Sometimes she was engaged, sometimes married, sometimes abused. These dreams just drove her to the brink. And she also had dreams of men that she met while she was touring in Europe. She died on February 17th, 1953 by a planned suicide at the age of 49, 24 years after the death of her husband, Norman. Family shade to a lie. The cause of death was reported to be from a chronic cardiovascular disease. She wanted no funeral. Bobbie's last words, darling, I love you. Please forgive me. I've got to do this. Tell Lauren, who is her first grandchild, when she grows up that I love her, but I can't face her. I got to read that to Lauren during the first time I made this presentation. No record that she ever had a sponsor was Bill. No record of her attending regular meetings in New York once she became national secretary. AA simply became too much like a job. Her compulsive pursuit of that job became obsessive. But without it, she lost her equilibrium. Her nightmares became a living hell. She drank in 1949 and 1951 at least, but did have periods of sobriety, attended meetings in California. Not a partner, not a dancer, not a national secretary. The role was eliminated by the principles of rotation and anonymity. She was succeeded by 2 women. That is the suicide note and the last thing she wrote to her daughter and to her granddaughter, Lauren, that was found at her bedside. Bill's March 1953 AA Grapevine Tribute. Margaret B., affectionately known throughout AA as Bobbie, passed away in her sleep on February 17th of an unforeseen heart ailment. That's not Bill's fault. That is simply because that's what the death certificate said. She had headed over to the General Service Office in New York in all the years of AA's adolescence, that exciting but fearsome period when no one could tell for sure whether our fledgling society would survive or not. Now, can you imagine? It's hard to actually recognize the words that he's saying. Bobbie was there and made her contributions for sure whether our fledgling society would survive or not. The question was an open question back then. Across her desk became thousands of pleas for help from individuals and hundreds from growing but anxious groups who wanted to be advised of the latest AA experience in meeting the problem that assailed them. It was out of this experience that AA's tradition was formed, and upon our tradition, her devoted labor set a mark which will endure so long as God will have our society last. Her pioneering work has proven an inspiring precedent for every intergroup and foundation secretary, and her daughter creates in the heart of each of her friends a void which can only be filled by the memory of what she left us and the assurance that her destiny is happy and secure. And this is among the finest writing of any letter, in my opinion, that you will ever find that Bill Wilson has ever written. This is written to Bobbie's daughter 6 weeks after Bobbie's demise. This is to tell you how deeply I share the loss of your good mommy with you, and I also write to offer you every reassurance and possible help that I can. My first recollection is of the tremendous debt of gratitude we all owe her. I think of the thousands she helped, the many who will never realize the unfailing devotion and love she gave them. Then there will be times people like you and me who were very close, who did better understand her magnificent spirit and her hope for and her love for us. This we are bound to appreciate more and more as time passes on. I know this will be as true for me as it will for you, and so great regret will be that I failed to return in kind all that she gave me, that she never seemed to receive from life all that she put into it. Yet I am sure you must share with me the comforting thought that her new life, a little way out of sight and hearing, has only begun, and that it surely must be filled with a bright promise no one that I have ever known could be more deserving. If at any time you feel the need for anything that I can do for you, please call me upon me instantly. Thus I shall be able to show you the affection I bear for your mother and for you. This slide just came up within the last couple months. Margaret, we found where Bobbie's remains are. She was cremated, and they're in the Berger Crypt in Cypress Hill Cemetery in New York. And this is just our history is evolving, and there are stories yet to be told regarding her too. A possible conclusion. Bobbie's suicide note stated, "I've got to do this." Robert Thompson, in his biography of Bill, wrote in 1975, for many, Bill W. had become their spiritual mentor. It seemed inconceivable that Bill, who'd been released from his obsession, and not by the same means been freed from every other difficulty and defeat. They simply did not want to believe that this man could on occasion be crippled by depression. Had Bobbie lived and shared what she knew about Bill, she could have seriously damaged Bill's reputation, which would have undermined his guidance and harmed Alcoholics Anonymous. She had thankfully protected and guarded Bill for all of her years as National Secretary. Why did we not get to know her? Why was she all but forgotten by the vast majority of the fellowship? She never told her story. She could not tell her story. She knew too much. She knew too much about Bill, as well as being tortured by loneliness. AA's fantastic communicator. I can't tell you the number of alcoholics all over the world who owe their sobriety to that special lady. If we looked into the sobriety hierarchy of somebody in this room, that might be able to tie right back to her. Who knows? Among the private papers, very little has been found critical of her, have been found critical of anyone else except herself. So one of the 2 national secretaries that AA ever had. And if you want any more about her, that's the book that tells the rest of the story. And for that, thank you for letting me share. If anybody has any questions in the time that we have remaining, I'll be glad to entertain them.
So after her death, so after her death, did Bill then step back into the primary communicating role?
That was again, he had subordinates always do that. You know, he was a letter writer and so on. But you know, in terms of the everyday communication out to the field, that remained the function of the what were called general secretaries that ended up following Bobbie. Okay, you know, Bill, you know, was always a seeker, always trying to formulate, very much battling for the conference. And of course, that was implemented immediately after Bobbie. But he always had his head elsewhere. And of course, writing the 12 and 12 was in there and so on. But it was he was again. Bobbie was an employee at the GSO. He was never an employee. So the roles were different even to start with. Yeah, Alonzo.
Hey, thank you. Do you have any paperwork or a handout or anything that has a synopsis or summary of your presentation that you can at some point hand out and give to us for later consideration, review, and research for the people in your audience?
Boy, I've never been asked that before. Maybe I should make one.
Duh.
Okay.
I would appreciate that. I've learned, I'm kind of tearful about the history and circumstance and maybe even the role God played in all of this, so that I could sit here and enjoy the fruits of the program. I would like to do more. I would like to learn more. So, and I don't care if you have to stay up late. Well, we're going to be here for another little while. If it's possible, I would. I don't know about anybody else.
Yeah.
Huh? How many people would like that?
Yeah.
Raise your hand.
Okay.
Yeah, we could not with me.
You got it?
All right, yes, Alonzo, thank you. Thanks for the suggestion.
What now we gonna do?
I'll follow through.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I missed it, I apologize. Were they lovers? Were they dating, Bobbie and Bill?
I don't think so, but I will say I'm biased. Okay, you know, but I will. It's in the book. as a huge footnote, is that there are 4 books that have accusations about Bill philandering. Okay, Susan Cheevers is one, Matthew Raphael is another one, Nan Robertson is another one, and Frances Hartigan is the 4th one. If you look at the index for all 4 of those books, you're going to come up with one person making the accusation, and that's Thomas Powers. When Kevin Hanlon and Daniel Carasino did a presentation, this is a number of years ago, was Bill Wilson a philanderer? And those 2 people, if you don't know their names, they're the ones that have done the PBS documentaries. Neither of them are alcoholics. They come out of alcoholism as their parents, but they don't have any axe to grind. And all they're saying that all the accusations that come, because there's no corroborating evidence, that you can't take the accusations as gospel. So the possibility exists, and sometimes when dealing with questions like that, sometimes, forgive me, some of the people, some of the people reflect more their own persuasion. It turns out to be more their own opinions than it is about Bill. People making claims that they know things that they really don't. So, and so when addressed to that, when I'm asked, what are your sources? And, but it's very possible that Bill came on to Bobbie. I don't have any evidence of it. But incidentally, also with Kevin Hanlon and Daniel Casino, their point is, where's the book I Slept with Bill Wilson? Don't you think with somebody that was that prominent, if there really was, some quote-unquote hanky-panky, that somebody would have blown the whistle on that for real and actually quoted that they had the sex rather than somebody else making the accusation? So again, it's open-ended. Last but not least on that subject, I of course didn't come into the program when Bill Wilson was alive, but I did host Clancy a couple of times, and one of them when I was at Marietta, the Marietta Roundup. We had so many people at the meeting that I couldn't leave. After I introduced Clancy, I couldn't leave the up front because the people were just spread all over the aisles and so forth. So I had to sit behind Clancy with my legs into me. Sure, Clancy, God, that would have been awful. But what I saw was how women looked at Clancy. And I can't imagine how the women looked at Bill Wilson. Boy, there's a guy there's the Founders Watch Committee, which Barry Leach came up with, and that was supposedly a group of people that would guard the women from Bill after an AA meeting. Okay, and as far as I'm concerned, that group of people had to guard Bill from the women. Okay, because that would be just as likely of an outcome. Because again, men that have strong speaking capabilities and exude accomplishment and sobriety and all the things that Clancy could do, extremely attractive.
Clancy or Bill? You said Clancy, did you?
Clarence, Clancy, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Duh, I'm sorry for that. I've got Clarence Snyder on the brain. Anybody else?
I have another question.
All right, in the back.
I got a little late. Was that a picture I saw just now of Bobbie? You said that she was buried, cremated?
Yes.
That's upstate New York?
She's in Cypress Hill Cemetery, and that was only found in Brooklyn, and that we only knew that.
Okay. Now another question: was that a memorial or something, or a monument that you can go visit or see?
It's an errand that you can go and drop a coin, and I'm looking for the first person that does that and reports back to me.
Okay.
But if you're up there, do it.
Yeah, I'm from Brooklyn. Yeah, that's why I wanted to actually get some information on that. So when I go home again, I want to go visit that side of town.
That would be wonderful.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Alonzo.
The other question I have is, and totally separate from what your presentation is, how much, if any, impact or interaction does Bill have with fledgling Narcotics Anonymous?
I don't think any.
Really?
I don't. I'm not aware of any.
Okay.
He may have. I don't mean to deny it, but that's just not a. You know.
The reason why I asked is because I think Narcotics Anonymous came in 1950-ish, and if I was trying to get that started, I'd have knocked on Bill's door, I think, just because. And I'm throwing that at you because you're the man.
Well, thank you. I should have an answer to that in terms of when NA actually got started, but I'm drawing complete blank on that now.
All right, thank you.
I think we're done. All right.
Gary, I just have one question, Gary. So, just looking ahead, 20, 40 years from now, what do you think AA is going to look like? You've got the leadership now, which I know nothing about. I'm so not in that. But you have GSOs, you have, when I think of the Rock, I'm like, oh, we're going to be good. We have some strong old timers right now that are impacting guys with 5, 10, 15, 20 years. I see the Rock just keep going. Meetings, heavy hitters meetings in Atlanta, meetings in Florida, North Carolina, they're great. But AA as a whole, the ones that publish the books, the ones that have the GSO meetings, what do you think that's going to look like in 20 or 40 years when all the old timers are gone?
Including me.
Yeah.
We're going to be finding out new things about us all the time. Because in many regards, we're walled off from our very own history. We don't know some very basic things about ourselves, which took place in the 40s. Eventually, I think we will find out more about ourselves as time goes on. And to me, it will enlarge the nature of the gift that we were received from what people had to go through that we've been protected from hearing. Okay, the sacrifices that many people ended up making we don't know. In other words, right now, again, if you're to make, in whatever area you're from, if you want a history of your own area, the only way you can do it is, first of all, get approval from the Archives Committee in New York, and then go up there and do the research, which is, believe me, it's no money-making enterprise to do that. Okay, it's a more labor of love. Then get permission to publish, which you also have. There's a property office up there. Money, property, and prestige might divert us from our primary purpose. Well, guess what? They do have a property office, intellectual property, and you got to get approval from them. But I don't have a crystal ball, Jay, but I believe that if we continue to exercise the gift that we've been given, that AA is going to survive. Okay, I believe so, because there's so many good people that have been associated with this outfit. It would be a horrible hell of if we ever blow it and for some reason or another not obey the traditions and the lessons that we've been given. And that's why it's so essential for us to know where we came from.
Gary?
Yeah, Jay?
Don't you and Drew and maybe a couple others have a weekly or monthly Zoom meeting or something like that where you go through history of various aspects of it?
Well, sure. Drew is active. I don't have any regular activity like he does. But Drew at 7:30 at NABA is doing Raiders of the Lost Big Book, I think, or something like that on Sunday. Drew is a regular on Zoom at Wednesday, and is going through. We're going through Pass It On at the moment. It took him 3 years to go through AA Comes of Age, and incidentally, you know, if you Drew is now become more or less the permanent archivist for the state of Georgia. And he has the largest collection of photographs of anybody, period, that I know of. And how he comes up with all this stuff, I have no idea. You know, but if you want to see his pictures of East Dorset, Vermont, will teach you more about the marble business than you ever wanted to know. Okay, I mean, that's how much detail that he'll go into, because of course Bill's father was in the marble business. Okay. And you know, it's Drew is really he is about the busiest person I know when it comes to making AA presentations. Yeah, in the back there.
Yeah, this is Damon.
Okay.
Can I ask you to do a favor and go to aageorgia.org/archives? Just to show them, because we have a page there which has got a whole host of 1 hour presentations from Drew, starting at the bottom with Bill Wilson, then Dr. Bob, then Dr. Silkworth, then Sister Ignatia. Then the Oxford group comes to Akron. It's some part of the communications. That's one of the pages I put up there.
Damon, I wish
aageorgia.org/archives.
I wish I could, but I can't, so I won't.
Right.
You know, this computer is not internet savvy at the moment.
Okay. But if anybody's interested, see me after. But if you just go to aageorgia.org and go to the archives page, there are 14 or 15 on there.
17.
Is it that many now? Yeah. So we've been putting them up there, and Drew's going to continue to do them. And if you have any ideas about what you'd like to see added in there, you can write to archives@aageorgia.org and put in a request.
Thanks, Damon.
All right. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Gary.